Everyone, and welcome to How to Become a Leadville Trail 100 Finisher. My name is Adam Hughes. This show is all about how to become different professions in life: firefighter, chef, teacher, and so forth. But today I have the pleasure of just speaking to all of you direct on my perspective on what it was like to train or decide that I wanted to do the Leadville 100, train for it, my perspective from the few days before the race, during the race, and information about what my crew went through along the way. So if you're watching this, you're likely interested in running the Leadville 100. Maybe you've actually got your ticket into the race and you were like I was 2 years ago, looking and scouring the internet for absolutely every YouTube video about it, every podcast about it. I think I memorized everybody's YouTube videos about how they successfully ran this race. And I wanted to give you a perspective from what I consider an everyday working guy that has a family with kids and what led myself to get through the race. And I'm happy to say I completed, here it is, the coveted buckle, the under 30-hour buckle, and in 29 hours and 37 minutes, I was able to get through this awesome race in 2025. So today it's August 29th. We're about 12 days post-race. And so I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I hope that this video helps you because I think comparison is the theft of all joy. So during this whole entire race, I spent a lot of time comparing myself to endurance athletes, comparing myself to people on Strava and so forth. And it becomes really disheartening if you're not able to get up to some of the peak weeks running like some of these other folks have. So let me take you a little bit back into history and give you an idea on my perspective on where I started this. So in June of 2023, so we are in August of 2025 right now, I was in a spot where I weighed the most that I ever weighed in my life. I was drinking a cocktail probably 5 nights out of the week. I have identical twin girls. I've got a boy. I've got a lovely marriage, and I work full-time in real estate as a residential loan officer. So real estate's very busy for me. In June of 2023, I got real frustrated on my condition of my health and my habits, and I told a buddy of mine that I was going to go try and run 10 miles. I have never run more than 3 miles in my life in June of 2023. I've never been in a race. I didn't grow up as an athlete, and I just thought I wanted to do something difficult. And if you were like me, I had just got through reading David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me. And I went out on a Tuesday in San Antonio, Texas in the heat in June and did not successfully complete my first 10 miles when I started. So I did get through 6 and I felt like I was going to die. So I challenged myself that Saturday. I was going to wake up before sunrise and try it again, and I was able to get through it. And after reading that book, I thought, you know what? I want to set a big goal for myself, and how awesome would it be to run the Leadville 100 trail run? And at that point, I verbalized it, and I made the announcement to my friends, my family, and everybody thought it was crazy at the time. A lot of people still think it's crazy. So as I started my journey to that, the first thing that I did was I found a local running coach. Shout out to Ryan Miller here in San Antonio, Texas, if he's listening to this. But he's been with me through this 2-year journey. My first question I asked him is, I said, I've never run more than 3 miles. Do you think I could run 100 miles? Am I crazy? And he gave me a lot of encouragement and said, hey, we can get there. So let's fast forward a little bit in time. And by the way, if you want to check any specifics, you can always go on to Strava and see the race and follow my splits. You can go to Instagram, The Real Adam Hughes, and check that out as well, or see on Facebook. If you're looking through the Leadville 100 and want to see like checkpoints on when I came into different aid stations, you could go to athlinks.com. My bib number was 209. And again, my name's Adam Hughes, so you could always go and look it up through there. So let's talk about leading up to the race. Did I have any experience ever running any races? So in in 2023 of that year, just to recap what I did race-wise, I did hike the Grand Canyon rim to rim to rim. It was a grind, 36 hours, big group of people. So that was my first experience hiking through the night. We didn't camp or anything like that. That same year, I signed up for my first marathon, the San Antonio Rock and Roll Marathon. I didn't, with the goal of running 100 miles, I'm not a big road running fan, but I thought I've never run in a race before, so this would be a good opportunity. And so I did run my first marathon, and I ran that in a 4 hour and 36 minutes. And then in January of 2024 was my big first race, and I ran the Tejas Trails Bandera 100K 62-mile race. I think that this is an awesome race to gain some experience because it's Texas, it's January, it's cool, so it's not burning hot outside. And this is also a lottery qualifier for Western states. So behind the scenes, I'm also thinking, hey, how awesome would it be to get into Western states? So in the Bandera race, if you run under 17 hours, you get that lottery ticket. And I'm happy to say I ran that race in about 15 hours and 36 minutes. It was a grind. I weighed about 15 pounds more than I weigh today, but the course was very runnable, and I made it through there. But then that's when I hit my big hurdle, and that's when I got injured. At this point, I tore my labrum in my hip, and this was the big hurdle that delayed my Leadville entry. So let's talk about how did I get into Leadville. I missed the cutoff for signing up for the training camp. So ultimately, I found fundraising as a second path to get into the race. So I was accepted into Team Livestrong, which is one of the supporters for the Leadville race out of Austin. I believe at this time in 2024, if you raised $4,000 or more, that guaranteed your entry into Leadville. So I was able to do that, and I got my entry in 2024 to run the race. But I was injured. Come to find out, after an MRI, I had tore my labrum in my hip, and so I had to defer to the next year, making this a 2-year journey. So in 2024, I didn't do a whole bunch, all the way up until February of this year. So if you're wanting to see how long do you need to train for Leadville, everybody is going to be different. For me specifically, it took me 6 months to train to get through this race. I can tell you that this year I started off in a boot. I was also battling plantar fasciitis, like the most extreme case ever, and I had to spend pretty much the month of January in a boot trying to heal my foot, getting ready for Leadville. So some stats on where I was physically. Starting on February the 4th, I weighed about 193 pounds. I'm a 5'10" guy. I'm not doing any strength training at this time. Just to kind of give you an idea of where I started, by the time I entered into the race, I was down to 172 pounds, so I had lost about 20 pounds going into the race. Again, just to kind of give you some perspective on where I was at. One big thing that I feel like helped me going into the race, if you're like me, you like to enjoy a cocktail every now and then. I did stop drinking on April 28th prior to the race, so I basically went through about 3 months of no drinking. And that was a big help in regards to going through and I think helping me feel like I've had enough energy to train. Some other details that I think would be interesting to hear is that I never did any weight training getting ready for Leadville. I am 100% not recommending that. I think that if I would have done strength training, that would have been super helpful for me during that. But trying to fit in running plus the body weight training, I did do that in my coach assignments. If I could have changed things to help me get through it with less pain, it would have been to incorporate more strength training if I would have made the time to do that. So here are some key things that I think personally helped me get through the race, which I think may help somebody else out there, is that we created in my office some 30-day challenges just for fun. And I really do believe that these helped me along the way. And I didn't really feel that until it was retrospect going into the race. So in the month of May, as a challenge amongst the people in my office, a group of us got together and said, hey, we're going to do 50 burpees a day for 30 days. And it was a challenge. And we had to text it to the group, time-lapse video, and so forth. So I did that in the full month of May on top of my running training and body weight training. In the month of June, we did a 30-day challenge, 100 push-ups, 100 air squats. I'm telling you guys, I feel like the 100 air squats every single day for the month of June was awesome. In the month of July, we did 50 lunges a day, 50 push-ups a day, 50 sit-ups a day. It took maybe all of like 12 minutes to do something like that, and I really do believe that helped the strength training getting ready and going into Leadville. So if you were to go back into my Strava, and some people ask, like, hey, how much were you running on a weekly basis? I will tell you that in a week, my top week that I got to was 49 miles in 1 week. I, looking back, feel like it would have probably been better for me to maybe hit 50, 60-mile weeks. Again, I was comparing myself to others, which were a lot of folks were doing. But my peak week was only 49 miles. Now, I'm training in South Texas, so that the heat does help in all of that training. And I will tell you that in my last 2 weeks before my taper, my long run was about 22 miles, and we've got a spot in San Antonio where every 5 miles you can run 1,000 feet. So my last 2 big runs were about 22 miles with about 4,000 feet of elevation gain, which helped me going into the race. So I hope that gives you a little bit of perspective on the base on where I was at going into Leadville, to give you an idea of where I was specifically. Okay, so let's transition and start talking about what the days leading up to Leadville. So I was lucky enough that I got up to Leadville about 11 days before the race. I arrived on like a Tuesday, Wednesday time frame. The elevation kicks you in the butt, and that's where I really wanted to come in and start to acclimate. I will tell you that on race day, my Garmin watch said I was 82% acclimated. So I felt good, but I definitely recommend it is easier to breathe the longer that you have time to stay at that elevation. When I did get there, I hadn't seen any of the course yet, so it was really important for me to get my eyes on Hope Pass. So literally the very next day, I believe was a Wednesday, I went ahead and started at Twin Lakes and ran up to the peak of Hope Pass. If you haven't done this before, it is such a beautiful trail run to do, and I did it on a beautiful day, and there was no storms or anything like that. So for me, I felt like that was great experience to be able to put my eyes on that. 2 days later, I went, and I believe on a Friday, I went and did the backside of Hope Pass. So this is a drive to Winfield from Leadville. That's about an hour drive to get to Winfield. There's a very long, bumpy dirt road that you have to go to get to Winfield. Keep in mind when you do get to Winfield, if there are any ladies or people that are particular about the bathrooms, there's a sign there that says, hey, the bathrooms are up the road. Those bathrooms no longer exist. So there's nothing there like that. So what I did was I did park at Winfield and then ran the backside of Hope Pass up to the peak and back down. And I loved doing that because for me, this is the hardest part of the race and typically is the most difficult for most people. So it was important for me to get my eyes on that. After that, the series of days that came post that, I did do a few smaller runs around Turquoise Lake. I was struggling with some ankle pain, so I didn't go through and I didn't try to push it too hard. But my advice would be definitely to get eyes on Hope Pass so that you get a feel for what that is going to feel like if you haven't done that already. Let's talk a little bit about drop bags and what that looked like going through coming up into the race. So I was lucky enough that I knew that I had crew coming to hang out with me. So I've had 7 folks that were going to come and help me. And so my drop bags were very limited. So I made one for May Queen, one for Half Pipe, and then one for Winfield. And so let's talk a little bit about what mainly for me was important that went into those drop bags. So I can tell you guys that I don't feel like I would have been able to complete the race like I did had it not been for Scratch Fuel. So I'm not sponsored by anything that I talk about here today, but the Scratch High Carb Mix, which I mixed 16 ounces of water with 7 scoops of Scratch, which gives you 400 calories and 100 grams of carbs, was a game changer. So if you haven't used this before, this stuff clumps up. So what I did was 2 days before the race, I emptied out some distilled water gallons, and I filled those up with Scratch. 2 days before, you put them in the fridge, and then the cool temperature helps dissolve the Scratch. And then once I had those in those gallons, the day before the race, we started to fill up 16-ounce water bottles full of Scratch. So that leads me to the drop bags that I had. Every drop bag in them had one 16-ounce bottle full of Scratch and then one 16-ounce bottle full of Tailwind electrolytes. And the reason why I like this versus going to the aid station table is I didn't want to rely on them having that, although the aid stations at Leadville are freaking phenomenal. I didn't want to count on that, and I didn't know like the mix consumption on how they made those, so I like to personally have them in my bags so that when I came to the aid station, I could refill my flask on Scratch and also refill on electrolytes. On top of that, I had a small Ziploc bag with all the nutrition that I was going to need in those. So let's talk a little bit about the gels that I use. So Leadville this year was sponsored by Never Second Gel. So I started using these a couple weeks before the race just so that I could see how my stomach reacted with them, and they did really well. And then to change it up, I personally really like the mango flavored Go gels by BPN. So I really mixed both of these gels up. So I would put potentially 3 of these, 3 pineapple gels, and maybe something sweet like a granola bar or something like that in the Ziploc bag that was going to be in my drop bag. Another key thing for me is that I'm a sweater, and in Colorado, you don't sweat a lot because of it's so dry there, but I was still able to sweat. So I always had an extra shirt, and I like to have an extra hat in those drop bags. So just in case I needed to change into them, I would have those. So some things to keep in mind on the details on drop bags: they've got to be clear drop bags. I ordered mine online and put some white duct tape, and then you put your name, the aid station, and your bib number on those drop bags. So keep in mind that as you go through and needing these drop bags, on your way out, which we'll talk about in May Queen, your crew's not allowed. So that's the first drop bag. And then you will need I personally use the half pipe drop bag on the way inbound. So this is in the middle of the night. So we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a little bit. So let's do a gear check. I wanted to give you guys an idea of what was on my body when I first went through and started. So I'll start from the top of the head. So for me, I personally started with these hats. I've got quite a few of these. These are on Amazon. I carry a bunch of them. You can still go through and sweat through them. When you start off in the morning, for us, it was pretty cold. I think it was like about 39 degrees or so. So I was a little bit worried about what I was going to wear at that time, whether I wanted to wear a beanie or not. And I chose not, and it felt like it was the perfect choice. So what I did was I wore this hat backwards, and then I wore my Phoenix light here, and I just put the Phoenix light through my headband here and started off the run that way. Moving down, just so we don't chafe. I personally like these nip eases to cover those nips up so that you're not getting too chafed. There's nothing worse than that. And I also carried extra with me. I wore one pair and they stayed on the entire 30 hours. So that was really cool. I wore a basic Under Armour t-shirt and a Under Armour long sleeve that went on top of that. I am a huge fan. Throughout the entire race, I wore a waistband. And this is from, you can see it's pretty worn out here. This is from the brand Naked. And I liked having the waistband because this always kept a 500 milliliter flask on me with water in it. And the reason for that is because in my running vest, which I'll show you in just a second, there's 1.5 liters of fresh water. My goal between every aid station was to finish that 1.5 bladder, but I didn't want to be without water. So I always carried one little extra water in my waistband, and that's how I knew when I was out of water, I knew I was getting low, and then I would have this one small flask on my waist to carry that water. Also, this gives me quick access to my phone or my AirPods if I needed them, so I always wore this on there. On top of my shirt, I like the Solomon 12-liter vest here. So for me, nutrition-wise, liquid-wise, I always carried on my left side pocket a 500 milliliter flask of Scratch and a 500 milliliter electrolytes, 1.5 liters fresh water in the back throughout the entire race. And I always refilled those every single aid station, and that's how I went with that. In my right front side pocket, I would carry my Ziploc bag that would carry me to that next aid station of any type of nutrition that I had. I knew that in the beginning of the race, I'd be able to eat more, and so that's where I carried like protein bar, oatmeal cream pie, some other gels and snacks. I would keep them in here as well. In my back pocket, I would just keep a small Ziploc bag, which is like this for me, and this carried any type of drugs that I needed. So this is like Pepto-Bismol, Imodium, gas-related items, if I had heartburn, things like that. Deep woods for mosquitoes. I never had any problem with mosquitoes, but just in case I needed that stuff, I did that, and I put that in here. Also in my pack, I don't think anybody ever talks about this, but I rotated between Tylenol and ibuprofen. So that was my medication intake as I went through, just to help alleviate some of the pain as I went through everything and so forth. So that's the top part. This is the waist. As far as underwear, I just have regular Reebok boxer briefs, nothing special, nothing fancy, and Under Armour running shorts, nothing fancy, pretty basic, pretty simple. Now getting onto the feet, if you don't already, I'm a huge fan of going ahead and lubing up your feet. I like to use Squirrel's Nut Butter or the good guys at Salty Britches. Also, shout out to those guys who were there at the race. Rubbing your feet down with any type of lube, I think, is important to help prevent blisters. I personally am not a big fan of toe socks. They've caused me a little bit of pain between my toes, but I'm a huge fan of these socks. These are from REI, and these are Darn Tough socks, and they're the lightweight wool socks. And I wore these throughout the race. I did change them out, but this was the brand that I used when I went through running. And then on top of my shoes, which I ran in Speed Goats, Hoka Speed Goats, I took 2 pairs, and I'll talk about where I changed those out. And then on top of those, I used the Ultra Gaiters to prevent pebbles and stuff falling into my shoes. So Outside of that, gear check wise, I was carrying my Garmin InReach Mini. This did allow me to send messages to my team. There's a big question on like, hey, do you receive cell phone service at Outward Bound and Twin Lakes? And yes, you do receive service, but it's kind of spotty. So I found that text messages go through, but people were having trouble sending pictures and things like that. So Outward Bound, Twin Lakes, where your crew is going to be, they will have cell service, but you will not as you run through certain pieces of the race. Okay, I did carry some sunglasses with me. These are optic nerves that I got actually at the Leadville race, and I never ended up wearing them. Didn't find a time to do that. Last but not least, which is super helpful for me, I wear a buff around my wrist. And the reason for that is because in the cold weather, I get a little runny nose, or if I get some beads of sweat to start to come down, I try to wipe that away. And so I wear a buff around my wrist just so that I can quickly, easily wipe my face or wipe my nose if I need to. So that's what that looked like. Going into Twin Lakes outbound, when you start to climb Hope Pass, you will likely, unless you're an elite athlete, will need some poles. These are just some basic Lecky poles. These are they're called Varios. So they're not the red and white ones that like most people have, but these have worked really great for me, and they're very lightweight, so I've loved them. I would also add, this is a cool necktie that once you wet has crystals that go through and help out stay cool. So I did put this on right before I started climbing up Hope Pass just to help cool me down. So that's some of a little bit of the gear check before I actually went in and started the race. I think chapstick's also still really important that I had on there as well. I didn't talk much about my watch, so I do have the Garmin Phoenix watch is what I use throughout the race. One key thing that I found out is that inbound, when you're running past May Queen and you have less than 12 miles left in the race, we were a bit confused on how many miles we had left. I asked other runners, and no one really knew exactly how many miles we had left until we got there because we were running close to cutoff time. So I found that it's key that to add on your data field on your screen how many miles you have left before you get to the finish line, because there's always some discrepancy on there, especially if you're cutting it close like me. So that's a gear check on what it looked like for me going into the race. Now that we've talked a little bit about where I started, we talked about the gear check, let's get into like the actual race and what to expect that morning from the time you wake up to the time we finish that finish line. So if anybody can sleep the day before the race, you are a very blessed person, because I literally could not go to sleep. Now, keep in mind that this year Leadville had the process to where if you they had a lottery for whether you were able to get a tent spot or not at Twin Lakes. So this is really important. They have 2 different drawings this year for you to get that spot. I missed the email for the first drawing, so I didn't get a spot in that first drawing. I put myself in for the second drawing, and luckily I was able to get a spot at Twin Lakes. Now, they have different times that they allow you to go set up your tent at Twin Lakes the day prior to, and my time slot was from 6 to 7, so it kind of messed up my plan on having a team dinner at my house prior to the race. So we want to be prepared for that if you get a late spot to set up at Twin Lakes before the race. Now, there were a lot of questions from a lot of people who did not get a spot at Twin Lakes, and some others may be able to speak better to this, but I know that there were quite a few folks that still went up the day before that did not have a tent and did set up spots in some of the open lot field areas around Twin Lakes. And then they just have you put your food in this small schoolhouse overnight because of bears and things like that. And so it sounds like people who did not get a tent spot were still able to go set up the day before for their runners, okay? So day prior to the race, we had pizza, and I tried to get to bed as early as I could, but obviously I just could not sleep. Woke up at 2 a.m. I was so nervous that I really couldn't even eat that morning. So I tried to down an English muffin with peanut butter and honey on top of that, but I was able to chug a full bottle of Scratch. Again, Scratch for me was a game changer because it gave me the calories and the carbs that I needed. So I had that already prepped in the fridge for me to go ahead and down that bottle. And then prior to this, I had been tapering myself off of caffeine for a couple of weeks, just having caffeine in the morning with a couple of cups of coffee. So I still had a cup of coffee and was able to have a movement in the bathroom, which I was really excited about because I didn't want to do it through the race. And I'm happy to report I am lucky that in the race, I never had to go number 2 during the full 30 hours, which was great for me. So we had all the crew come meet us at the house. We stayed just north of Leadville, just about half a mile from the start line, and we all walked together to the start line, said our goodbyes, took some good pictures. Now, a big question that I always thought of is, where do you start in the mass amount of people? Do we start in the front more towards the front, but you don't want to push yourself too fast? And then, hey, do we start more in the back, but you don't want to get caught behind the conga line? So I will tell you, if you look at my chip time from when I crossed the start line, it was about 14 seconds in. So personally, for me, I am not a fast runner, but I didn't want to get stuck behind the conga line around Turquoise Lake. So I stood probably just in front of the middle of the pack in that regard. And I'm happy to report we were able to consistently run from the start line to May Queen around Turquoise Lake. In fact, while I was running, I was making some comments. Everybody's talking to each other. It's a great time. And I was just sharing like, wow, I'm so happy that we are not having to walk. And one of the guys that was doing it for their 10th time was like, hey, if you were 200 yards behind this spot, you would be walking behind that conga line. So I think that if you're a steady runner like myself, then you would want to get right in front of that mid-pack. Now, starting off on your pace, your plan on what you want to do, I ran off the pace chart that you can Google and find about Leadville. I was trying to run a 28 hour, 30-minute pace. And so between the start line and May Queen, I had to run something under around a 10 and a half minute pace, which I just knew was not going to happen. They always say burn the sheets, right, when you start, but you try to do your best as you go through the process. So I was able to consistently run through May Queen. One thing that I was really surprised about is how much I sweated, even though it wasn't daylight yet. And so when I got into May Queen, I shed my long sleeve shirt off and I put that into my drop bag. And I didn't even go to the aid station table because I already had a bottle of Scratch and a bottle of electrolytes already in my drop bag. And I refilled my neoprene bottles, and then I did go to the table for them to refill my bladder. Because again, the goal was in those first 12 and a half miles, I want to drain all the fluids I could out of my pack. But I always knew I had my extra one right on my waist in the event that I needed some more water. So I did that. I dumped whatever food I didn't eat, and I still grabbed my new Ziploc bag that I had of food in that May Queen bag. And then I started back up on the trail. I will tell you, there is a fire road between May Queen and before you get on the top of Sugarloaf. And some people question as to whether they run or walk that fire road. I don't think it honestly matters unless you're going much slower. I chose to run that, but I can tell you that I passed some people that were walking it, and those people later passed me later in the race. So I think it really just depends on how you're feeling at the time on whether you decide to run, because it is a slight incline for a longer period of time. As you're approaching on your way outward bound, you do hit power line. And it's always a question of, hey, how fast do you run down power line? So I chose to run down it fast, but not too fast. And the rule of thumb is, hey, try not to pass anybody else because you're probably going too fast because you don't want to burn your quads so quickly. So I chose to go down it as quick as I could, and not try to burn out my quads. Now, one thing that I didn't mention, which I think is really, really important, is that I never looked at this as a 100-mile race. In my mind, I always looked at this as 3 different races. Mile 1 through 38, I knew I had to run as much as possible because it was the most runnable part of the course. And I knew this is where I needed to make up time. Race number 2 was going to be from mile 38 to 62. And I knew this is where we had to climb and where we got to get over Hope Pass and come back. And then I looked at from 62 to 100. This is where I was going to be able to run with my pacers and my friends. So this is always how I looked at the race. I never thought about it as a 100-mile race. So as I approached Outward Bound, again, I had my crew there, so I never saw what they had at the aid station, although it looked awesome. My crew, I wanted them to have a full cup of ramen noodles that I could down. So keep in mind, the aid stations most of the time have the mini cups of ramen noodles. So I downed an entire big ramen noodle on there. I found that I wanted to change my shirt, my hat, because I was still sweating and I didn't have a change of clothes there. So that was frustrating. I wish I would have had a change of shirt and hat just to be able to feel a little bit fresher. Again, I filled up my water bottles again. I had drained all my fluids between May Queen and Outward Bound. And at Outward Bound, I had one of my crew members. She was just in charge of fluids. So she took out my 2 neoprene bottles, put in the 2 new ones with scratch, electrolytes, and filled up my water bladder while I was taking a 5-minute break at Outward Bound. And outside of that, I would say my biggest trouble was probably mile 25 through 30. It was really flat running. I started to have a lot of knee pain, but just started to problem solve and figure out where that was coming from. Was it from speed? Was it from posture? How I was running? So I'd encourage you, expect problems, and a lot of this race is just problem solving. And so even though your knees feel like, for me, they were going to blow out, I knew they weren't. I just had to adjust and figure out where the problem was. So outside of Outward Bound, we took off running, and I knew the next spot that I was going to see my crew was out at Twin Lakes. From Outward Bound to Twin Lakes, again, I just made the most out of the journey to get there. Okay, so let's talk about coming into Twin Lakes. So coming in there, you're now coming up to mile 38, and I knew that this is where the second race that I had in my mind that I needed to complete. And I knew that this was going to be the hardest part. Luckily, I had my crew there. I did eat a burger as I was there. I also wanted to do a complete change of wardrobe. I took off my hat. I put on a bandana. This would be the first spot that I would actually listen to music. So I put on some Shocks headphones, got myself pumped up, get myself a set of poles. I also changed my shoes and my socks, even though I was about to walk through the river, and got ready to go and tackle Hope Pass. By this time at Twin Lakes, I believe I was out at about 12:25. The cutoff there was at 1:30. So throughout the whole race, I was running about an hour or so, hour to 45 minutes before cutoff times. And so when I headed out of there, it was just a big mental push to know that I was about to do something hard, no quitting, no matter what. And I made it up Hope Pass relatively quickly. It was a beautiful sight. It was slightly raining the whole way up there. I took some advice from a good friend that I had a rain-resistant jacket from Asics that was breathable versus a completely waterproof jacket. At this point, though, when I was going up Hope Pass, I didn't need the jacket. So what I'd recommend is, as you're starting that approach to Hope, you have a good ways where you have to go through the river. I had never actually ran with wet shoes and wet socks and chose to go ahead and do that. Some folks say that, hey, it dries out pretty quickly. For me, it just like never really dried out, but it wasn't too bad either. So for a short while, they're a little heavy, and then they lightened up. As you're walking through that river in your field, I'm thinking, hey, let's try to down at least 2 more gels. I need as much energy as possible. So I definitely recommend, if you can take in nutrition at that time, you 100% should. As you start approaching, my approach up the mountain went really, really well for me. I was able to pass several people along the way until you get to the Hopeless Aid Station. At that point, you still have a little ways to go. I did sit down. I ate a banana. I also took in some ramen noodles, and then I also slammed another gel just to get over that pass right on top of Hope Pass. So pretty exciting once you get up there, because now you know you got the downhill portion. So after I went downhill, I took it pretty slow and easy all the way up until Winfield. And as most of you know, if you've done plenty of research on this, a lot of times Winfield is a quitting spot for a lot of people. So when I walked into Winfield, I didn't even go to the aid station table. I saw a free chair that was there. I got my drop bag that was available, and I sat down. I looked at my time for there. I was only in Winfield for 13 minutes. So relatively quick, because I was going to give myself 15 or 20 minutes to be there. The aid station folks were awesome. As soon as I sat down, they were all about getting me out of there. Like, you need to get ready, you need to get moving. So I took my drop bag. I did have a change of socks in there, because again, you've already gone through the river one time. I changed my socks out, and this is where I started to introduce Celsius. So I did have a Celsius can in my drop bag. At this point, I really didn't have any need for food. I didn't have the appetite for it. But again, I had my scratch and my electrolytes, and I refilled my bottles again so that I had that. And then the aid station attendant helped fill my bladder while I was changing and so forth. So I walked out of there at 5:09 p.m. with the Celsius in hand. And the aid station lady was like, hey, there's 2 trash cans that are going to be along your way. Don't sit here and drink your Celsius. Drink it on the way and start walking. And that's exactly what I did. So I felt good leaving the aid station at 5:09. I believe the cutoff was at 6 p.m. And so that's where I started the run back up. So as you're running the backside of Hope Pass, the key takeaways for me, so when you get to about mile 54, I think that this is a key spot. The trail automatically turns left, and you start to do the ascent up Hope Pass for 2 miles. Right at that spot, take yourself off the trail and take in 2 more gels, because you're going to need it. And at that point, I also took in some Neuro Gum, which has about 40 grams of caffeine in it. And then I started the grind uphill to Hope Pass. I will tell you that this was for sure the hardest part of the race. I think I clocked 36-minute miles at this point, which seems miserable. On fresh legs, I did it in like 22-minute miles. So it is a slow grind. My biggest advice not only is nutrition, but at the same time is never look up that hill. It is discouraging. I just kept looking at 1 foot forward and just keep pushing along the way. Because keep in mind, if you make it past this point and down into Twin Lakes, you have an 80% chance of actually finishing this thing. So it's important to do that. So once I got up to the top of Hope Pass, I was so excited. And of course, it started to storm and rain on me. So this is where the rain jacket came in. Ran down to Hopeless Aid Station, took in a banana, took in some ramen noodles, threw my jacket on, and started to proceed forward running downhill. Now, guys, kicker here was that you should always have 2 headlamps in your pack. I like they say, if your headlamp accidentally turns on in your bag, it will drain your battery. And that's exactly what happened to me. My Phoenix headlamp, when I went to go turn it on, was completely dead. And luckily, one of my crew members had stuck an extra Black Diamond headlamp in my bag, and that saved me coming down into coming down into Twin Lakes, which was great. So we're winding down. We're finishing up half the race. Just some things to keep in mind as you're coming into Twin Lakes. I was a little less than an hour before cutoff time coming into there, and I was feeling awful. I was about 2 or 3 miles or so without any nutrition or food. I felt horrible. We'll try to throw a picture up here so you could see what I look like, but my crew snapped an awesome shot of me basically looking dead with my eyes closed in the seat. I needed to close my eyes for like 5 minutes just to like catch myself, and I needed some food in my stomach. So I took literally 3 bites of a burger, tried to take some ramen in and get myself going, but I only spent 15 minutes back at Twin Lakes before I was up and going, but I was excited because I started my first pacer with me. Now, when you leave Twin Lakes, one thing that I completely underestimated was how freaking cold it was. I left that aid station, and I think because I had been sitting down for 15 minutes and I just started back up at about 5 or so minutes into the hike out of Twin Lakes, I looked at my pacer and I said, "How cold are you?" And he said, "I'm fine." And I said, "I'm cold. I'm so cold. I'm like deep into my bones cold." And luckily, he was more than bundled up, and I took my pacer's jacket off of him and put it on me with gloves, and we proceeded forward over to Outward Bound. Shout out to my pacer, Josh Scrivener, for sacrificing his jacket for me so that I wasn't as cold. And I will tell you, there is a spot at Half Pipe that I'm so happy that I put a drop bag there, because Half Pipe, in their aid station tent, they had a fire, which was great. So there were a lot of people gathered around the fire. We're talking, this is getting close to like 1 o'clock in the morning, and you're able to get some ramen noodles. But again, I was completely out of fluids. So this is where I had the scratch and the electrolytes, caffeinated electrolytes, so that I can refill my neoprene bottles. So I definitely recommend, even if you don't think you're going to need anything at Half Pipe, I would put something in that drop bag just in case. So coming into Outward Bound, I was feeling much better. I was feeling way warmer. And so I actually, when I got into Outward Bound, I overpacked jackets because I was so afraid of getting cold again. But that ascent after you leave Outward Bound, climbing Powerline again, I started to shred off all my clothes because of how warm I got. So for me, what I would have done or had different for nutrition-wise is that from Twin Lakes to the rest of the race, I could not eat any dry food. So my mouth was so dry. So what I was doing was eating peanut butter jelly sandwich and water at the same time. I'd take a bite of peanut butter jelly and take a swig of water, and I would get that like baby food in my mouth before I could swallow it. So I would definitely, for myself, take more moist foods. Like I wish I would have had some mashed potatoes. I wish I would have had like bananas or things like that I could actually swallow and get down, because I couldn't eat any of those dry foods that I had. So it was basically a grind from there. Some people ask the question on like, hey, should I have a tent at Outward Bound or not? I'm telling you, you probably do not need a tent, and I'm going to talk to you real briefly about that here in the crew side of things here in just a minute. Coming into May Queen, where you have 12 and a half miles left, I put on my race shirt that I wanted to finish the finish line with. I still kept my poles with me, and I met my last pacer for the last 12 and a half miles. And we had to book it because I was running short on time. You'll see that I clocked, I think, a little over a 12-minute mile or so. It was like my fastest mile in quite a while after you've already run over 85 miles. And so shout out to my other buddy Josh for helping me get over to the finish line. So coming into the race towards the finish line, obviously there's nothing better than that feeling of knowing that you're actually going to do this and doing it with so many other people was awesome. Before I get into the last lessons learned and so forth, I do want to give you a little bit of perspective on what it was like with the crew. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about crew's perspective. I spent some time downloading with my crew on some things that might be helpful to know coming up front and coming into the whole process. So just know that whenever you check into the race, you're going to get 2 pacer bibs, and you can move one of those bibs over to a third pacer at that aid station at that time, and they can sign an actual waiver at that aid station if you choose to have more than 2 pacers. For us, Twin Lakes, keep in mind, allows 4 crew members and a pacer so that they can go and hang out there. Otherwise, people are at Outward Bound, and there are a ton of people there. So my crew, for what they did with me, is they were with me there on the start line, taking pictures, pumping me up, and getting me ready for the race. Once I started the race, the crew went back to the house, and they hung out for a second. They used the restroom, they made some coffee, and Outward Bound, at least this year, didn't allow you to come in until about 6 a.m. So they arrived right about that time into Outward Bound. Their biggest note that they had in regards to this aid station is that it is dusty. Like, there are a lot of cars. There was no rain, so it was like a big dust bowl during that time. The other thing that came about it was whether we needed to set up a tent or not. We had a pop-up tent. We did not feel like you needed it because we were coming into Outward Bound rather early in the morning, so it was still cool. And then again, you're not coming into there until late at night inbound, assuming you're on pace like I was. Okay. So what is helpful to have is like a little picnic, like pop-up table, something that's like a 3 by 3 foot foldable table that goes into a bag. That was very helpful to have next to me when I sat down and rested, so that I could see what was on the table and have the option to look at different snacks and things like that on there. Okay. The crew did use my, it's like a boiler that boils water, and that helps with making the ramen. So we had that along the whole entire way. At Twin Lakes, it is crazy super helpful to have a wagon. So especially if you get a tent spot and your food is all the way in the schoolhouse at night, if you have, like, from Academy, they sell those wagons that you could throw an ice chest in there. It'll help you from having to carry things a long way. So I would definitely have one of those. Twin Lakes is great because they have food there. They've got the general store, so you're not without anything. But we did have a small 17-inch Blackstone grill, and my buddy Sean was all in charge of food, so he cooked for the crew and burgers and bratwurst and so forth like that. If you wanted to have that, and we did leave that there overnight when we set up Twin Lakes tent, and so everything was very safe and was great there. Keep in mind, they're there. Your crew's there for a long time at Twin Lakes, and so the question comes up: is there enough time for you to go to Outward Bound, back on the shuttle bus, and then come back to Twin Lakes? And there's time, but it's not recommended because the lines can be somewhat long. But for my crew, they were not. So when you're at Outward Bound, your crew is, and then they need to get to Twin Lakes, they're going to be jumping on a shuttle. And I asked, how long did you have to wait for that shuttle? And the line looked really long, but the shuttles were going pretty fast. So they were like 15, 20 minutes waiting for that shuttle. That shuttle doesn't drop you off right in front of Twin Lakes. You have a short walk down a trail, and we'll try to throw a picture up for you. But there is an actual dirt trail that you have to walk along for a short amount of time. I think it's 5-10 minutes before you actually get to Twin Lakes. So if you have somebody who's elderly or have a problem walking on these little rolling trails, this is going to come up, and they will have to go through that. And then my crew personally just stayed at Twin Lakes during that time till I came back down. So after that, my crew met me outward bound, inbound, and at that time, again, just had the table set up. It is helpful if your crew has like a blanket. I was severely cold, so every time I came in, they wrapped me up with a jacket, with a blanket, and it was nice to have that little table there set up with anything that I needed so that I can go through and choose from. And then coming inbound, now you're allowed at May Queen inbound. So you're coming in, if you're on pace like me, you're coming in at around 6 a.m. And again, they did the same thing, set up the small table, the chair. I sat down for 5 minutes and got myself together there, and before I went out and finished up the last bit of the race. So crew is definitely helpful. I give all the credit to all the people in the world that can do this solo without a crew. I personally feel like it would have been crazy difficult if I didn't have somebody there as crew. So what were their roles before we wrap up? I had one crew chief, which was my sister, and she was mainly in charge of like my wardrobe. So she helped me with my change of socks, my shoes. Just to recap on that, I changed my shoes Twin Lakes outbound, socks change at Winfield. When I was back at Twin Lakes, I put back on my shoes that I originally started with because they're muddy and full of dirt and everything. Okay. So she handled all things shoes and so forth. And then we had Starla. She handled all things fluids. So that was my scratch, electrolytes, and fresh water. We had my 3 pacers. I had a friend, Nick, and he was in charge of time. So he was always letting me know where we're at on time. Are we behind? Are we fast? Where are we at? And he told me and gave me an idea of what needed to be done. And then we had Sean, my other crew member. He was in charge of all food. So he made sure that all food was available. He helped feed the crew and everything like that. So hopefully that provides you just some good advice on what the crew would look like and what their roles would be doing. So let's recap on lessons learned and moving forward. If you're looking to run the Leadville race, a question that has come up with me is, would I run it again? And the answer is absolutely not. When I was within 24 hours of the race, I was like, there's absolutely no reason I would ever do this again. And then afterwards, I was like, hell yeah, I would do this again. The timing was tough because I've got kids and they were starting school and so forth. So it'd probably be several years before I went and tackled this beast again. So 100% would. After, did I suffer any injuries or anything like that? I had 2 blisters. I think I'm going to keep all my toenails. Had some hurt ankle. Try to put up some pictures of those things. But outside of that, I fared fairly well and really happy about that. What happens actually after the race, and what do you do? Do you go to sleep? Do you go party, or what's going on? Well, if you have a crew like mine, everybody wants to go party and hang out. And then for me, after we take some pictures, my body starts to go into shock mode, and I immediately felt nauseous. And I had not felt nauseous the entire race. And so I sat down and waited for the vehicle to come, and we all went and gathered back at my house. Everybody was celebrating, and they're like, we want to go out and drink. And I'm thinking, I need to close my eyes and go to sleep. And so once I got back to the house, just to be completely transparent with you, I was like, I need to go and take a shower. My chafing was the worst ever in the entire world. There's no amount of nut butter that you can rub on yourself, on your butt, front side, everywhere that's going to prevent this from happening, I feel like. So I had to go take a shower, and as soon as I got in the shower, I threw up all over the shower floor, and I was just happy it didn't happen during the race, but it was what it was. And so after I got out of the shower, I got in like a hoodie. I came downstairs. Everybody was surprised to see me, and they were like off to the races to go and hang out and party and go to the bars. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to try and go to sleep for a few hours. And that's exactly what I did. So I crashed for 4 hours. I woke up. It was about 5 p.m. and I felt like so good. My legs had quit throbbing. I felt rested. And I told one of my crew members that was still at the house, I was like, let's go out. And she was like, are you sure? And I said, yes. So we literally went out to the bar. We had dinner. We had fun. And then the tiredness started catching up to everybody. Some of my crew was up 44 hours. So at that point, at the end of the night, everybody started to wind down and say like, hey, we're tired. And I was feeling awake. So at that point, we all finally decided to go home and hang out, and had a horrible night of sleep. I slept 2-hour increments up and trying to make notes and downloading this experience. So if you do get an opportunity to have this experience and you go through Leadville, I'd recommend journaling every thought and everything that's happened before it's out of your brain, because there's so many lessons learned, and we're 12 days post Leadville, and I'm still writing down memories and things like that I want to always like keep in the memory bank of lessons learned. So good luck to those who are trying to get out there and do hard things. Next question is biggest tips going into the race. I feel like if you're going in to do the Leadville 100, you have to ultimately decide that you are going to finish. There's no questions whatsoever. You're going to get this shit done no matter what. It's got to get done. I saw too many people that thought a DNF is possible. Like if you're thinking that there is a way out and you plant that small seed in your mind, I'm telling you that seed will grow, and you will see many of people climbing up the backside of Hope Pass thinking that they're going to get a DNF, and then as soon as they start thinking that, a lot of times it comes true. You 100% need to know that you're going to finish this race. Secondly, for me, I never look at it as running a 100-mile race. I would set it up in segments, whether it's to aid station, or for me, I like to look at this as this was 3 different races. I ran a 100K before, which is 62 miles. And so all I'm doing is running 3 smaller races, mile 1 through 38, 38 through 62, and 62 to 100. Just 3 different races, and I can do that mileage. Next tip is I never look up. Never look up the mountain. It is discouraging. It will kill your motivation. I always just look forward and look down at my feet and what direction we move forward. I promise if you complete this race, it's a game changer, because the amount of respect that you'll have for yourself goes through the roof. You learn so much more when you go past what you feel you're capable of. If you have any questions, things I can help with from what I figure a middle packer guy, feel free to give me a shout, and I would be happy to help.